I'm not quite sure what you're supposed to call it in English. It's the Shikoku pilgrimage, is it? Or Henro. And I'm very pleased that we've got an event on this subject, because I don't think we've ever had one on this particular topic in the 7 years that I've been at the Daiwa Foundation, and it's something I'm certainly very interested in. And our speaker, Professor David Moreton, is certainly the man to tell us about it. He's been living in Tokushima for, I think you said, 18 years. He's currently Associate Professor in the Institute of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Tokushima University. And before that he was at Tokushima Bundi University, so he obviously likes Tokushima. And he has written, it says here, 7 books on the Shikoku pilgrimage. So there must be a lot of different aspects to it. And numerous articles, and appeared in films and documentaries, and helped Joanna Lumley presumably not go around the whole pilgrimage, but part of it when she was making a television program in Japan recently. So that's probably all I need to say, and I'll hand over to you. Sorry.
The mic. Wow. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Moreton from Canada, although my grandparents are from England. They immigrated to Canada after World War II. So it's been 19 years to come back to England, and it's a great pleasure to be able to speak about my research topic that I've been doing this for about 20 years now. So in a very short time, in about 40 minutes, I'd like to take you back in time to the Shikoku pilgrimage, and I'd like to talk to you about mostly about the first Westerners who came and experienced this long, arduous, and lengthy journey, and to share with you some forgotten stories about the pilgrims and temples, and to show you some promotional activities with Japan and to the world. And yes, feel free to take pictures of any slides that I show you. And why I chose this period of about 100 years ago is that in 1917 the first Westerner came and wrote about his experiences along the journey, and then in 1937 there was a mini replica pilgrimage tour in Osaka to which over 200,000 people participated in. So in this 20-year period, the Shikoku pilgrimage prospered. There were many guidebooks were published, and many customs not seen in other period that I'll show you later on were carried on. So my objective tonight is for you to learn about the first Westerners who made this pilgrimage, and to share with you their impressions, and again for you to learn about forgotten or not well-known stories of faith related to the pilgrimage, and to learn about this intriguing history and culture of the Shikoku pilgrimage. The Japanese people certainly like pilgrimages, and looking on different various sources, I found that there are various the pilgrimage routes to Kannon, Yakushi, Nyorai, Fudo, to different deities. There's 17, 19, 20, 12, 200, and 23 pilgrimage routes in honor of Kobodaishi. So I'll be describing to you the main one, the Shikoku pilgrimage, and I'll give you a brief description of it before we go back 100 years. So it's 1,200 kilometers long, and you visit 88 main temples along with 20 other smaller temples. There are also numerous sites around the island. So most people start in Tokushima and Kochi, Ehime, Kagawa, and finish around here. It's quite a long journey. So you just, many people ask me, so how many times have you done it? It's not like I can get out on a weekend and do 1,200 kilometers in my car, so not very much. And it is believed that Kukai, or Kobodaishi, founded this pilgrimage. Kukai was born in Zensuji Temple in Kagawa, and he created Toji Temple in Kyoto and founded headquarters on Mount Koya, and is believed to have made the pilgrimage when he was 42 in 815. The bad luck year for men is 42. So he went around. And in 2014, it was the 1200th anniversary of the founding. So there's a large increase of people who came and made the pilgrimage. However, with most things in life, unless there's a big event, people aren't coming. So since then, the number of pilgrims have been going down, and fewer and fewer. So Kobo Daishi created the headquarters of Shingon Buddhism on Mount Koya. There were approximately 120 temples, and leading all around to the inner sanctum where Kobo Daishi entered eternal meditation. He's not dead yet, he's just sleeping behind a curtain and is fed every day. So his spirit surrounds the whole pilgrimage. In 2004, Mount Koya was designated as a World Heritage Site. So about the Shikoku pilgrimage, there are various references, 12th and 13th century. Pilgrims were writing graffiti on the walls in the 1500s. I was here with my buddies. And Chozen, a Buddhist priest, wrote his diary as he went around in 1653. And it slowly became more and more popular. In the late 1600s, the first guidebooks were produced, very similar to this one from 1814, with the main deity, illustration of the main deity, description of the temple, and very hard to read writing. I met a Japanese man in his late 80s, and he said he could read this no problem. Met a Japanese woman in her early 80s, and she said she couldn't read it. So in that 5-6 years of education, being able to read and not read the old script. So pilgrims are starting to come. And so perhaps this is like a scene from the 1800s. You had to just walk and suffer through the rain. Then by the 1930s, people were coming by car. And nowadays, there's a variety of ways you can walk it, again, taking a month to 2 months. You can cycle it, 2 weeks or so, a taxi, a bus, of course, with bus, etc., costing more money. Actually, the first bus tour was in 1953. And since then, it's just increased. And there are even now bus tours for Westerners, usually 10-day trips for about $5,000. But increasingly popular, very popular. So it's getting more and more. And walking, bicycling, cycling. And 20 years ago when Japan, the economy was booming, there's one more way that is no longer popular, which is gone away, but you could do it by helicopter and limousine. Just fly over the temple and pray. And 3-4 nights, only $10,000. This is the late 1990s. However, this tour has been stopped. So that's pretty well what's happening nowadays. So let's go back in time and look at what the pilgrims were wearing and the first Westerners. From the 1600s, the 1800s, you can pretty well see the hat and the gown. Not much change in 200 years. A clearer picture from around the 1880s. You've got the hat and the staff, the box, straw sandals. Pretty well the same. And 1927, a mother and her 2 daughters. 1937, father and son. And if you notice, they're not wearing white, which has now become the traditional color. But white became the traditional attire pretty well that during the first bus tour in the 1950s. Come on the bus tour, you gotta buy the white. However, there were some people, some earlier in the 1920s who were wearing white, but it was not standardized. So 100 years ago, people did not have nice hiking boots like they have today. And here's a picture. They would put money in this bamboo and take the straw sandals. People would make the straw sandals and put them here. And this is a picture from 200 years ago. Again, put the money here, take the sandals, or there's rice balls here, you put the money in, and you could do that. And if anybody wants to challenge themselves during the reception, I've got a pair. Try, and these will said to have lasted only 3 or 4 days. So you had these sort of vendors along the way. However, even that was not the standardized footwear for pilgrims, Shikoku pilgrims. They were first were wearing these half-sized, keep you on your toes type of straw sandals. And ashinaka really means half your foot. However, the people from the 1600s who were, the man called, not Lemon, sorry. That's Iemon, who gave out sandals and offered accommodation. So that was the standard. It's much easier than having these tied up around your legs. You just sort of like sandals. So let's look at how the first Westerners described and how they experienced the pilgrimage. Wenceslaw Moraes, 1899, became the Portugal's first consulate for Kobe and Osaka, and then lived in Tokushima for 16 years. And he wrote a lot of books about his experiences in Japan. And one of them was Obon Odori, and in it he describes the Shikoku pilgrims from 1916. Many believers walk from one temple to the next and experience fatigue and various dangers, but the pilgrimage is something worth doing. Tokushima is the place to meet for the pilgrimage. In the city I meet men, women, and children from around the country who have come to make the pilgrimage. He says their attire is unusual. They wear a short kimono, a big straw hat, leg wrappings, and wadaji, the sandals of travelers. Around their neck they wear fuda, the paper slips, with their name and other writing. They use a staff and they carry on their backs a knapsack containing the necessary clothing for the 4-month journey. It took longer back then. When they finish their kimono, which is covered with stamps from the temples, it becomes a valuable memento and a treasure to not only the person who wore it, but also for future generations. So people would have it stamped as they went to each temple. Now, most people have a book and they use. Interestingly, in his book, he has this black and white picture of 3 pilgrims. I was able to find this sort of colorized version of it. You can see, get a better picture of what they were wearing and using as they went along. And at the same period when Moraes was living in Tokushima in 1916, there was a German POW camp in Tokushima. The Germans were captured in Qingdao in China, about 4,000, and were brought to Japan and were interned in 12 camps. Eventually they made a large camp in Tokushima City called the Bando camp, which is right between Temple 1 and Temple 2. And the Japanese camp commander was very friendly to them, pretty well let them do whatever they want. So they had their own bowling alley, they had yacht clubs, they ran marathons around the city, they made their own beer, they had newspapers, a very free life style. So because they were stationed between 1 and 2, they also saw the pilgrims. And for some amazing reason, the priest at Temple 1 allowed them to put on an exhibition for 10 days. So there, they made German bread, they had orchestras, they played music. About 50,000 people came in the 10-day period. So a close connection between the pilgrimage and the Germans. And the Germans, again, so much freedom allowed to them, so they took some pictures of the pilgrims during this, about 100 years ago. Again, the black attire, interesting head wrapping. And one man, Herman, who was in the camps didn't close until 1920. They enjoyed the camp so much. They didn't close it down until 1920. And out of 950 Germans, about 100 stayed in Japan and taught the Japanese how to make German bread. He stayed on and ended up, he worked for 40 years in Osaka. So around just after World War I, his younger brother Alfred wrote to him in Japan saying, there's no jobs in Germany, can you find me anything? And Herman was able to find him a job in Shikoku. So this is a profile of Alfred, the younger brother, who was captured in World War I. Then in 1922 he came with his wife and no daughter yet. His daughter was born in 1923. 26, his wife and daughter returned to Germany. Then in 1927, Alfred made the pilgrimage by walking and by rickshaw. He gave a lecture in Tokyo, returned to Germany, wrote his PhD about the pilgrimage. Then in World War II, became an interpreter, became a POW again, and interned in England for some time. And after World War II, all the materials he had about Japan and his pilgrimage that he had in his house in Germany were confiscated and never returned. So the only things that remain are his PhD, and I'll show you some of the materials in that. So the book that he published from his dissertation contains the history, description of the temples, a description of the pilgrims, and various rules, where they stayed. Osettai, the custom of helping one another, that will come up later, very common in Shikoku. And 88 photographs of the temples and scenes. So even Alfred noticed the custom, and he said every year charitable hands are opened along the pilgrimage road, giving to the pilgrims food, drink, and other gifts. This beautiful custom arises from the same spirit which the word of Christ teaches. Inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. Who feeds the pilgrim feeds also the daishi, Kobo daishi, who makes the pilgrimage with him. For that reason, the woman of the house brings to one person 2 little plates with rice, one for the pilgrim and one for the invisible companion. And presently, I obtained the copyright rights, contacted his family, and was able to republish the German edition. And Alfred, his friend, translated his book in 1941, and just perchance I found a copy of it in Hawaii, and I was able to copy the whole thing into English, and now a Japanese edition is also out. And fortunately, I was able to contact or find Alfred's daughter in 2006. So for 13 years she was 83 and until she was 96, we were corresponding by letter. And just before, or she passed away, and her family said, David, we'll give you the things that our father Alfred used on his pilgrimage, of which one is the robe, which I mentioned that they stamp. Now this is not a regular robe that the pilgrims wear. This is one that you put on someone who has died. So Alfred must have been carrying that and perhaps thought he would wear that when he passed away. And the box around the neck with his name and the paper slips that pilgrims pass to each other and give to people. So very rare. So let me show you some of the photos that Alfred took, sort of a comparison between 100 years ago and today. Temple 1, not much change. Temple 2, got the same statue, the tree has disappeared. 4, the main hall. 10, looking over the valley, you've still got that. Temple 23, the town has certainly gotten a lot more. A path marker along the way. Pilgrims fast asleep on the temple floor. And the next photo is very rare. There's no Japanese has ever taken a photo of this scene. But pilgrims with leprosy were very common in Shikoku 100 years ago. They had weren't accepted anywhere else, so they sort of came to Shikoku as an escape. Rare photo. So that's his experience. Around the same time, Frederick Starr from the University of Chicago came. And he eventually came to Japan 15 times. He first came in 1904 to take a group of Ainu to the St. Louis World Exposition, as sort of a living exhibit. Came back to Japan repeatedly, climbed Mount Fuji 5 times, and he put his name into kanji Sutaru. And Frederick Starr made the pilgrimage twice. First time only about half the trip, and then the second time he did the whole route. And that's his, again, very rare to be wearing the white 100 years ago, not common. And fortunately, I was able to find in the Library of Congress his pilgrimage book that he got stamped and signed at each temple, as well as the paper slips that went into the box around your neck with his name. And when he visited Temple 2, he did not take these pictures, but this is what he probably saw when he came 100 years ago. Very similar to Alfred's picture. And at Temple 2, he writes that while he was there, he noticed some crutches that were left by lame who were miraculously cured. However, this picture, again from the same period, is of Temple 88. So at various temples, people had left crutches at the temples. Frederick Starr also visited Temple 5, and there it had burnt down, but was rebuilt. So when he visited in 1921, he said, the priest took us to the side trail to all that remains of the Gohyaku, the 500 dakan, the 500 statues. Most were destroyed by fire, and these pictures are about from 100 years ago. Then Frederick Starr, when he went to Temple 22, a scene, and it is said that this tree was planted by Kukai 1,200 years ago. However, it's disappeared now. A picture of the gate, Temple 22, and of the bridge leaving the temple. Frederick Starr, when he went there, he wrote that at Byodoji, Taisho 10, February 26, and he had a group photo taken in front of the steps. But a more important event that happened while he was there, before that, he wrote that he was impressed with the kind-hearted people along the Shikoku pilgrimage, and one unsaid rule states that no matter where you go, to please help and support each other as much as possible. And interestingly, when he completed the entire journey, he was so impressed, again, with this support system that he wrote a letter of thanks to each of the 88 temples. And let me share with you a couple of paragraphs from there. I have just completed the pilgrimage to the 88 sacred places in Shikoku, and this journey has been one of the most experiences in my life. I would like to express my gratitude here to all of you for your kindness. I am not someone who has special qualifications that warrants such special treatment from all of you. In fact, I am nothing but a single pilgrim, a foreigner whose language and race is different, and one who is not a believer in Buddhism. I am just a representative of someone who has come from a far-off country and do not have the least amount of authority to expect such special courtesy on my behalf. Despite this, however, I have been treated with kindness to a great degree, and the memories of this treatment and words exchanged are a great joy to me and something that I will never forget. A Westerner coming to Shikoku 100 years ago and having these wonderful feelings and being treated just is amazing to me. And another person who came in the 1930s was Henry Noel from America, who was a French language and literature professor, and he wrote a few articles in a magazine called The Tourist by the Japan Tourist Bureau, and sort of abbreviated, condensed those contents into a book in 1939. And while he visited Shikoku, he wrote, visited Temple 75, saying that Zentsuji, where Kukai was born, is one of the 88 places, visited by countless priests in the white clothing with the hats, again with things carrying on their backs. For 3 months or more, they wander all around from one temple to another until they have been to the 88. When he went to another place, he noticed, it was early January, he noticed someone walking through the snow. Some pictures from his articles. And again, he mentioned that what they're wearing, a bell, prayer books, white robe, and again, this sort of collection of stamps or tablets that each temple offered. But Henry Noel noticed an interesting thing that was very common in the 1930s for women. It was very common for women in the 1930s to make this pilgrimage because they wouldn't be able to find someone to marry. There's hardly a chance of finding a suitor. So it's sort of a common thing. So there's quite a few pictures from the 1930s of a girls' school going out for the pilgrimage. So it's quite a common thing. So this is mostly about the people and the Westerners, but I'm also interested in tales related to each of the temples. And I'd like to tell you some tales related to Temple 19, Tatsueji. Again, in the same period from 80 to 100 years ago, there were some books of tales written, and Tatsueji is sort of a spiritual checkpoint You don't check your passport or anything, but there's a bridge before Temple 19, and if you're not a good person, this crane will fly down and block you with his wings. And it said there are 4 such spiritual checkpoints around the island. If you're interested, I have translated these 2 books into English, CanadaHenro.com articles. And let me share with you a few of them, which might surprise you. One is about a woman called Okyo in 1803. She was engaged, but she found a new boyfriend, and they thought, what do we do with that guy? So they decided to kill him and run away. So they came to Shikoku and come to the pilgrimage, and they came to Temple 19, and they're praying at the temple, and her hair went upside down and entwined into the rope. And they called the priest, and the priest cut her hair off, and she became a nun and repented for the rest of her life. The rope in her hair. You can still see it today beside the temple. I don't think anyone's done a DNA test, but scaries don't kill your fiance. Another example, Temple 19, 12-year-old girl could not use both of her legs, and her parents were very concerned. But after worshiping here, strangely she could stand on both feet. They left both of her canes here and went to Temple 20. So like Frederick Starr, who noticed the crutches at Temple 2, as I mentioned also at Temple 88, again, she's leaving her canes and crutches here. However, people who were cured sometimes left something else. Very odd thing. Let me show you. Received the blessing. He cut off the end of his little finger and left it at Tatsueji. And nothing else to give, so it chopped off his finger. And I'd read about these stories, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if I could find a picture? I did. There they are in the jars. And the different sicknesses, this one's blindness. So this person was cured and great. So unlike the canes or the crutches that Starr observed, these are not on display anymore. Be nice to see them. And another thing that pilgrims left who were cured were wagons. Those who could not walk were either pushed or pulled in wagons. So from the 1930s. So if you go to some of the temples, you can see some of the wagons. At Temple 22, there's 3 of them, and they're nicely on display with a storyboard. However, at 44, it's with the garbage. Temple 57, it's nicely on display. 1933 story, the priest got a call from an old man saying, "It was me. I donated this wagon for my grandfather." That's sort of true story. Temple 88, you walk into the main hall and you have to do a 180 and look up, and it's sort of like a wheelchair. Interesting shape. But if you search hard, you can still find them. However, like the crutches and the canes and many of the wagons, they're gone. You can ask me later. About the pilgrimage of the Shikoku pilgrimage, around this time of 80 to 100 years ago, a lot of promotion, not just in Japan but outside. And here's some examples of pamphlets made by shipping companies and by tourist companies. This one saying, let's visit all the 23 temples in Tokushima Prefecture. This one, Shinko no hiking of faith. Kanko no Shikoku, so sort of the tourist, they're sort of blending tourism and pilgrimage together, even from the 1930s. Not just this hardcore pilgrimage, but to make it sort of easier hiking and sightseeing. And also to the world, interesting, this group, the Foreign Department of the Institute of Research in Living Religion, in their books, saying that the tourists are increasing. 1930s, they're getting more and more. And to serve as a guide to study Japanese culture, they produced two books. 1935, the Nichiren sect, 1937, the Shingon sect. And the Shingon book, they have pictures of the pilgrims, the sacred songs of the temples, different descriptions there. As well, Japan Tourist Bureau, again, made a lot of pamphlets promoting Shikoku. Again, 1936 and 1947. Interesting that this one's white and then this one's black. And this one includes the whirlpools that are also famous in Shikoku. And in the books, they say Shikoku is sort of a butterfly-shaped island of romance. From old, Shikoku has been known as a land of pilgrims, and the 88 temples of Daishi are still preserved. This attests to the fact that even today a number of Japanese visit the island to pay homage at these temples. Apart from its religious significance, Shikoku has much to offer to visitors. Attractions in the island are many and varied. So even at that time, trying to promote Shikoku to the world. So it's been a very quick journey back in time to visit Morais, Alfred Boner, Frederick Starr, Henry Noel. We got to see what the pilgrims, how they thought about the pilgrimage and what they wore, and the wonderful custom of Osetai, of helping one another. So unfortunately it's time to return to the present. I hope you enjoyed this time back, looking back at history. So the four that I mentioned, Frederick Starr and Alfred Boner, the Germans, Morais in Tokushima, and Henry Noel, vividly described the various aspects of the pilgrimage in their writings, and were all impressed by the culture of acceptance and helping one another. As well, we have seen that this period from 100 years ago, that the Shikoku pilgrimage was very strongly promoted, not just in Japan, but also around the world. However, it is unfortunate that canes and crutches and wagons, etc., fingers, used by pilgrims of about 100 years ago have disappeared, and that many stories of faith regarding the Shikoku pilgrimage have been forgotten or no longer told. But I hope tonight that you have learned some interesting and unforgettable points about the history and culture of this great journey.